Welcome to the second monthly meetup of the Guadalajara Bitcoin and Lightning meetup. My name is Guida. I'm an engineer for Start9 Labs. And today's talk is entitled Disrupting Every Industry with Lightning Micropayments. Now, the talk is going to be in English. I want to get to the point where I can do these talks in Spanish. But one of the purposes of this meetup is so that I can get comfortable talking about Bitcoin and Lightning in Spanish. So hopefully hopefully on the next talk I will do it in Spanish. All right. So the first question you might be asking yourself is, what are micropayments? Well, really small payments. So specifically, they're smaller than any payment that you've ever seen or made, probably. They're smaller than any coin that you've ever seen. The smallest unit of on-chain Bitcoin is a 100 millionth of a Bitcoin. Anybody know what it's called? Satoshi. One Bitcoin in MXN, which is the peso, 476,000 pesos. One Bitcoin in USD is about 24,000. These are just some numbers I looked up today. So one Satoshi, which is 100 millionth of that, is about half a centavo in Mexican pesos and about 1/4 of a US penny in US dollars. The smallest unit of off-chain or Lightning Network Bitcoin is 1/1000th of that, and that is called a milli-Satoshi. So you might be asking yourself, why are micropayments useful? Well, as Andreas Antonopoulos said, and he was quoting a guy named Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. And so what that means is that when given a message, the container that the message is sent in shapes the content of the message. And so an example of this is for TV, for television broadcasts. You have the TV is very expensive to produce, and so since it's such an expensive medium, they've hammered out, okay, this is the exact format that will give us the most results. And that is, you get 18 minutes of content and 2 minutes of ads. And so since that is the only format that works, or small variations of that, that's pretty much the messages that you can get are fit into that format. So you're not going to get any messages that don't fit into that format. And so this is why when YouTube first came along, the television stations laughed and said, oh, that's going to be worthless because that's not how people want to watch content. Well, it turns out when you allow people to upload whatever videos they want, the variety of different types of messages changes. So the same can be said of money. So when the container of money changes, the types of applications that you can have with money also change. So payments tech dictates what kinds of payments are allowed. So right now, the payments tech that we have includes credit cards, PayPal, SPEI, which actually works a lot better than ACH. SPEI is the Mexican system of interbank transfer, and ACH is what we use in the US. So because this tech is limited, many kinds of payment cannot exist. There are minimum transaction sizes, so you might try to make a payment, and the person cannot accept a credit card payment because the payment is just too small. It can be very expensive. It can be very slow. There can be chargeback risk. It can be too hard to sign up. There could be many hidden terms and conditions. It could be canceled at any time for no reason because you're kind of just dependent on the whims of employees at this centralized service. There's no free lunch, meaning that every good that you have, there is a cost to it. So somebody has to pay that cost somehow. Either it's you or it's somebody else. And so because of that, unsustainable services cannot survive. So eventually, a business that's providing a service that's unsustainable will go out of business. So many kinds of useful businesses and services cannot exist. So when I think about services, this is a very broad term. There's services are anything you can buy, right? Anything that's useful is a service. And many of them are free, as we'll see. So I like to divide services into two broad categories: private services and public services. So private services are those that are paid for by the user. They usually are paid with subscriptions or one-time fees. Their costs of production are high. Their costs of delivery are high. Costs of delivery are low. I didn't say that. Risks are variable, but all of the costs of producing a private service are passed on to the user. Whereas with a public service, the services are free. This is what it means for a service to be public, is it's given away for free. Usually it's funded either by advertising, donations, taxes, theft, fraud, various ways of funding a free service. People get creative. Costs of production are low, but costs of delivery and distribution tend to be high. The risks are high. The costs are paid by somebody other than the end user. This does not mean that there are no costs. Again, there's no such thing as a free lunch. And so if the user is not paying the costs, somebody else is paying it. So let's see some examples of private and public services. So private services, on the private services side, we have your internet and cell phone. Maybe you have Telmex. Maybe you have Total Play. Maybe you have AT&T. These are companies that you have a subscription service to that provide you a service. And as we've noted, they can kick you off the service whenever you want. There are commitments. You know, if you have you have to sign up for a year, and if you don't keep buying the service for a year, you have to pay a cancellation fee. Cable television, the same. Any premium apps that you pay for, things like Spotify, things like Netflix. Now moving on to the brick and mortar, to the physical world, we have toll roads, we have fitness places, we have medical services, private medical services, anything that's a paid API. People use paid APIs for gathering data, finance data, things like this. VPNs are usually paid. Private education obviously is paid. Web hosting, and any kinds of consultants or professionals. This would be lawyers and accountants and things like that. And anything involving banking and insurance is generally done through a private business. On the public side, we have broadcast radio. This is obviously a free service. Obviously, things like Netflix, Spotify have been supplanting that over the years, but you can actually still buy a radio and listen to radio over the waves. You can do the same thing with television. That's being mostly replaced with Netflix and things like that. Any unpaid apps, these would be your map applications, your search applications, so Google Maps, Apple Maps, Waze, anything that you download from the internet and it's free, and then you use it and it's still free. And then, of course, we have social media, things like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, what have you. Then we have unpaid APIs. Unpaid APIs would be basically a lot of the social media services and the unpaid apps that we talked about have APIs, and you can use them, but they have things like limits and stuff. So moving on, we have government services. Any government services are public services. Again, these are all free, quote unquote free, but obviously there are hidden costs. So things like public roads, public utilities, police, fire, and hospital services, public education, public parks. And then there are nonprofit organizations, things like the Red Cross, things like food banks. So anytime you have an organization that's supported by donations, that would be a nonprofit organization. Okay, so what are the pros and cons of these different models? So we have, on the private side, can anybody think of a pro of a private service or a private business?
Pro of a private?
Yeah, like what's something good about private? Voluntary, that's good. I didn't put that on there, but so what I had in mind is, so voluntary leads to good quality, right? Like you interact with somebody on a voluntary basis.
For the service provider to provide good service.
There's a greater incentive for the service provider to provide a good service. So what I said was high quality. Exactly. I'm sure there are other pros, but I couldn't think of. They were all basically related to that. However, there are several cons. They tend to be expensive. They tend to have a high barrier to entry. And so because they have a high barrier to entry, they tend to have very few participants and very few people can access these private services. People with wealth, with means. Everyone using the service must be trusted. And so because everybody must be known, a lot of times there are these kind of, there's burdensome and invasive approval procedures that involve a lot of paperwork and waiting. There's commitments and contracts, like we said before. If you have to use this service for a year, and if you don't, there's a huge cancellation fee, or you end up just having to pay the rest of the contract. Now, moving on to the pros of public services. So, what's a pro of a public service? It's what? It's free or low cost, exactly. So I said free. What are some of the cons? Actually, let's have some volunteers. What are some of the cons of a free service?
Low cost, low quality, I'm sorry.
Low quality, exactly. You read my mind. What else? What's that? You have no choice in the matter. I didn't put that on here, but
Involuntary.
yeah, involuntary. That's a good one. I should have added that. Yeah. So hidden costs. Anybody else? I have like 3 or 4 more. So
You being the product, like they're money.
you're the product. Exactly. That's what I meant by hidden costs. I think we'll just work through the rest of these and see if you guys thought of them. So they tend to be slow. They tend to have advertisements. Okay. So yeah, you're the product. This is the you're the product one, right? So when a service is free and generally the service is supported by advertising, if it's not a government service or a nonprofit organization. And so what that means is that you're not the customer. The customer is actually the advertisers. You're just the user. So you're the product, and you're actually a selling point. You know, when a free service goes out to an advertiser, they say, "Hey, look how many users we have. You know, we have 10,000 users. We have 100,000 users. So many eyeballs. You're eyeballs. That's what you are." They tend to be crowded. They tend to be noisy and filled with spam, and of course, they degrade over time from abuse. And this is also known as the tragedy of the commons, or tragedia de los bienes comunales.
It's not matter for your particular argument, but like there's also the fact of like public services, the people that provide those services, like the employees or the teams, whatever, they're usually poorly compensated.
Exactly.
And so they have less incentive to do well at their job.
Exactly.
The service itself is low quality, but the people that are contributing to it are given a low
Exactly. So like government employees, for instance, they don't get paid more when they do a good job, and so they're sitting there like, well, I might as well do a shitty job. I might as well do a terrible job. I might as well take forever because it doesn't matter, right? And they're nearly impossible to fire. Exactly. Okay. So now that we've looked at the pros and cons, might there be a missing category of services? Might there be a bunch of other services that that maybe have all of the pros and none of the cons? The Federal Reserve. No, just kidding. That is one potential answer. But the one I was thinking of was Lightning Network Micropayments. Now, so here are some of the basically Lightning Network Micropayments are the best of both worlds because you can pay as you go, so you're not locked into a contract. The price reflects your usage, so all of the costs of providing the service are actually built into the price that the user is charged. So the costs are directly reflected in the price. No hidden costs, so you're not the product, you're actually the customer. So the business is incentivized to provide a good service. Payments can happen in real time, and so this can be down to the. So you guys are all of you who are employed anyway. Raise your hand if you get paid monthly. Okay, so that's most of us. So why? Why do you get paid monthly?
client billing cycles.
But why are the client billing cycles monthly? Why not get paid every week or every day or every minute?
Easier for clients to do their expenses on a monthly basis than weekly.
Right. Okay. So I suspect that a lot of that is just inertia because of the way that the banking system works. If you tried to do invoicing more than once a month with the banking system, because the banking system is so convoluted, the banking system would explode if everybody tried to do invoicing every day or every minute or every second. But with Lightning, those limits don't apply. So there actually are no practical limits, no theoretical limits to how much Lightning can scale because the payments don't actually hit the chain. So when you make a payment to somebody else, only the people that are routing the payment, only the sender and the recipient care about the payment, and they see it, and then after a while, the information for that payment can just be thrown away. So there's a low barrier to entry, especially for things that cost 1 Satoshi, right? So a half of a centavo. I think the smallest Mexican coin is the 10 centavo coin. Yeah. So this is an extremely low barrier to entry. Anybody that can do anything useful can potentially earn a sat, right? So anything that a human could do that a robot can't do, for instance, anybody can do these things. No approval required, right? You don't have to be a trusted member of the network. All you have to do is make sure that you pay the fee, and if you paid the fee, then all of the costs associated with providing you the service are already paid by your fee. There are no long-term contracts. You just go, and you go and you stop and you come and go as you please. No ID of any kind. So as they say, nobody cares on the internet if you're a dog. Nobody cares in Lightning if you're a dog. Nobody cares in Bitcoin if you're a dog. Nobody cares if you're a refrigerator, right? You could be a program and just you could be like an entrepreneurial program that just tries to earn money. More on that later. Frictionless tipping and donations, and all contributors get paid immediately. So here's some examples of micropayment services. The first few examples are going to be things that exist now, and the next few are going to be hypothetical examples, because really just use your imagination. This can be applied to pretty much any industry, and that's what I meant by disrupting every industry with Lightning Micropayments. So podcasting and radio. This is one thing that's already starting to be disrupted. There's I don't know if you guys, how many people have heard of Fountain or Sphinx? Cool. All right, good. We got some people. So these apps can be used for decentralized and permissionless podcasting, censorship-resistant podcasting, where basically the app will pay a certain number of Satoshis per second or per minute for you to listen to the podcast. And so, generally it ends up being very cheap, but of course the benefit is that then you don't need to listen to advertisements. You can just listen to the podcast. And of course the other benefit is, I actually don't know if I said this in the last, no, I didn't say this, but you can directly support your favorite content producers instead of going through a middleman to pay the subscription service, and then the money goes over here and then it gets paid out to all these different providers. You literally they provide a Lightning public key, and then and then it generates invoices, and then you pay those invoices for every minute that you listen.
You earn money by listening to podcasts.
So on Fountain, you earn money by listening to podcasts. And I looked into their business model, and I'm not sure why this is the case. I don't want to hype it too much in case it turns out to be unsustainable, but I imagine that Fountain themselves, because they're an exciting startup and they probably have some funding, they probably have some money to throw around so that they can pay people to basically come to their app and listen.
So they're not ad-based? They don't run ads?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what they specifically done.
Right. Yeah, they don't have ads. Actually, well, so I believe you can also use Fountain to earn money by listening to promotions. I think that's on here.
The model that a lot of people use, they have their ad support, but basically they give the customers a cut of the ad revenue that they generate.
Yeah.
Because they represent the demand, right?
Right. Let me see if that's on here.
Yeah, I'm not sure they would be doing it without the ad support.
Okay. So it doesn't say that, but so Fountain does a lot of things, and I've only just started playing around with it, and so I'm not sure if it works exactly like that, but I do know that you can earn sats by listening.
Leandro?
Yeah, that's Leander. You can earn sats by listening to podcasts. You can earn sats by listening to ads, and I believe you get paid more for listening to ads. And then of course you can just not listen to ads because you're already paying to listen to the podcast. So actually the way that it works is you're paying a little bit out, and then some is coming back as you're listening. And then you can also set a certain threshold amount that you want to support. So basically it's like you can say, I want to pay 6 Satoshis per minute to listen to this podcast. And then as you're listening, every minute it just makes that payment. Oh, let me go through some of these other ones. So you can easily split payments between contributors. So if you're a podcast producer and you're not just one person, and you're a team, maybe you have some team members, you can automatically just have those Lightning payments get routed to different, each payment gets routed to those contributors in the proportion that they contributed. You can reward two people for sharing. So one cool thing that you can do on Fountain that I think that you can't do on anywhere else that I've seen is you can make clips of podcasts. And then when you share that clip on social media, the producers can see that and they can tip you with your Lightning public key. So basically, other people. So it's like decentralized distribution, right? Yeah. So you eliminate all the middlemen and you reduce cost to everyone. And Sphinx Chat does the same thing, but in a slightly different way. So there's another app called Stackwork that does digital labor outsourcing. So how many people have heard of Amazon Mechanical Turk? Yeah. So this is a service whereby sort of fungible labor tasks are distributed throughout the world to anybody who wants to do them for kind of like micropayments, like kind of very small amounts of money. And it's kind of like just farming, right? Or grinding in a video game. So if you're like in Bangladesh or you're in India or you're in just sort of countries on the lower end of the economic spectrum, you might have trouble finding like economic opportunity locally, but if you can get access to the internet, and Stackwork is actually doing this, they can lend you a cheap cell phone that has a connection to the Lightning Network and a Lightning wallet, and then you can actually pay off the cost of that cell phone by doing work. And then basically the cell phone is yours after that, and you're just earning sats from businesses who need work done. And then they also have AI worked in somehow, where the AI breaks down complex tasks into tiny repetitive tasks like automation, image processing, object identification, translation, and pretty much any sort of more or less fungible or easy task that any human could do. You hire out each piece to anyone in the world willing to earn sats, and then the AI stitches all the work back together for a finished product. So I don't know how much time we got. I know. All right, better move fast. Okay, so decentralized Twitter. This is an app that just recently has a beta version available on the Embassy, which is the product that I work on. It's called SqueakNode. It's basically a decentralized version of Twitter. You can charge people to see your squeaks. You can earn money whenever your messages are requested. It's impossible to cancel anyone. You just block them if you don't like their messages. You can't get banned from the platform. You can mirror your actual Twitter to allow access to Twitter for those who have been canceled and can't have an account. And then you can earn sats for your mirrored tweets. So VPN. So a VPN, how many people have a VPN or know what a VPN is? Cool. All right, so everybody knows what a VPN is. So just to summarize, it's basically another computer that you can pretend to be. So often you might want to have a computer that's co-located in a certain country. You might want to hide where your real IP address is. Things like this for privacy. So hide the location of its IP. So you could have a VPN service that charges by the kilobyte or the megabyte, and payments can happen whenever the data has been forwarded. So literally, just every time you transfer a megabyte through this service, it sends you an invoice and you pay it. No contracts and commitments. You just pay it until you're done using it, and then you stop paying, and then you're done. You can use several micropayment VPNs at once. So you could set. You wouldn't have to have one provider. You could use a bunch of them at the same time. Your client could actually reach out to a bunch of different VPNs and see which ones have the best speeds or ones have the best location. No surveillance or censorship, because everything is encrypted, etc. Decentralized ways. This is an idea that came up of Jack Spirko's podcast. They were raving about it. Anyone can post about hazards in the road. Anytime a hazard report saves you money, you can tip the person who reported it. hey, I just didn't get a speeding ticket, or hey, I didn't just fall in a pothole. You probably saved me $1,000. You know, like here's $5. You know, so yeah. Messaging spam control. This is one that's really important, especially for the decentralization of things like email. You can charge people a few sats to send you a message. If the message is legit, you can refund their payment. If it isn't, you keep their money. If it's from someone in your contacts, don't bother charging them. If someone tries to send 1 million messages, they have to pay 1 million fees, and so this discourages spam. What's that?
Have you seen WhatsApp?
I haven't. Does it do this? Awesome. Okay. Cool. Yeah, so WhatsApp, but with a T on the end. So WhatsApp. Yeah, cool. That's awesome. I haven't seen that yet, but I will try it. If someone is not a spammer, they're not risking much money. But if they are a spammer, they have to be paying millions of these fees, and so they're quickly going to be out of costs, out of money. Hashcash, if you guys have heard of this, is a similar anti-spam feature that was invented and actually was the inspiration for proof of work for Bitcoin. Sphinx Chat, which was mentioned earlier as a podcasting app, also has a messaging feature that does this. So every time there's a message sent, you send a few Satoshis, and then the Satoshis get refunded after a while, unless abuse is detected, and then they're not refunded. And then it can work for email. So one of the big things that email providers do, this is like Gmail, is they have a spam filter. And the spam filter is really, really sophisticated, and it constantly has to be updating to what spammers are doing. Spammers are constantly, it's kind of an arms race, right? Google will put in protections to detect spam, and then spammers will say, oh, that's, we can get around that by doing this instead. And then Google will be like, oh, they have a new strategy, and on and on. Micropayments completely solve this problem for the reasons stated above. Just charge the spammers. Now we don't need Google. Road congestion control. Charge people a few sats to drive in a certain distance on the road. You can pay with a bot that just runs in your car and scans codes as you drive. Money goes towards maintaining and securing the roads. If someone doesn't pay repeatedly, your security service paid for by other users can escort them off the road. Micropayments solve the tragedy of the commons without a central authority. Bitcoin on-chain fees are an example of this in another domain. Bitcoin on-chain fees actually inspired me to think about this, that micropayments can be used for spam control, because basically if you have all of the transactions that get into the Bitcoin blockchain are, as long as they pay a fee, then they'll get into the block, and they're a legit transaction, and they're not considered spam. Early on, when the blocks weren't full, people would say things like, oh, people are spamming the blockchain. But as long as the miners were happy with the fees that those people were paying, it doesn't matter, right? Because all the costs of putting those transactions into the block are covered. So same idea. Decentralized APIs. So you can run a Raspberry Pi, we talked about this earlier, that charges for use of its services and earn passive income. So this is any imaginable API. Any imaginable online service can be done using a very cheap computer running services and a Lightning node. Notary services, Oracle services. You guys know what those are. Maps. You can actually resell APIs. You can actually sign up for a paid Google account, and then charge other people to anonymously use your Google account. Although I'm not necessarily recommending that, because Google that would probably break Google's terms and conditions. So definitely be careful with that. Health data, data storage, any kind of computation. So you can charge people to store their data for them, and you can do this in an encrypted way, so that only the person paying for the data can see it, and your server can't even see it. And I already mentioned reselling paid APIs. And then, of course, competition with providing all these services is going to drive costs to zero, and everybody wins. So why Lightning? Well, it's fast, it's cheap, Bitcoin is sound money, so it doesn't need to be transferred into any other asset. It's resistant to censorship, it's resistant to surveillance, it's layer 2, so it potentially scales to all of humanity without harmful centralization. And it's the first micropayment system that isn't centralized. So micropayments in general enable all of these use cases, but the problem is that if the payment system itself is centralized, then you have the same problems again, right? You have the payment system can cut you off. And so this is why things like PayPal and Venmo and MasterCard and Visa and GoFundMe, exactly. Yeah, thank you. That's why all of these things are problematic, because they're still centralized, even though all of the things that they can potentially enable, all the services they can enable are decentralized. The payment systems themselves are centralized, and so Lightning is a decentralized payment system, and so it won't do this, and it can't do this. Lightning can disrupt practically any industry. And then here's some further resources. If you guys want me to link this, actually I'm going to link the slideshow in the Telegram group, so just watch for that. I was inspired for a lot of this by Andreas Antonopoulos' talks. You guys should definitely watch his videos. Thank you. Here's where you can find me. Start9.com, and my Twitter is Guida6. And this has been episode 2 of the Guadalajara Bitcoin and Lightning Meetup. Thank you, guys.
No Q&A?
Oh, yeah. Well, there is a Q&A, but I don't have a slide for the Q&A. Yeah.